Hi everybody, it is Monday, and I was actually thinking about talking about the craziness surrounding the Jussie Smollett case today, but then things happened. I talked about the Mortal Kombat stuff on Friday because I felt like I should elaborate on the tweets I made, but I didn't realize that on the exact same day I made a video on that subject, Bounding into Comics covered my original video with the Jade reveal and then my tweets on the subject. And I ended up getting a lot of attention for it, both positive and negative, and it turned into a bit of a thing. And first of all, I want to credit Bounding into Comics for, typos aside, actually venturing into the idea of benevolent sexism and talking about it and educating people on it because it's not terribly well known. Before I forget, because I actually did see an increase in new Patreon signups since I started doing that. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/LeannaK. The post office box information is coming soon. I just have to put it into the YouTube description box. So Patreon is still the best way of doing it, but I know some people don't like any form of online payment, so there is a post office box. It's coming. But without further ado, let's get to the actual article, because this was, when someone linked me to this on Sunday, I was like, uh-oh. And then I read it, it's like, whoa. One, they didn't actually misquote me. Two, they quoted me in context. Three, they actually seemed to understand what I was talking about, which is so rare in my experiences with the media. So let's have a look at this. Here we go. See, here we are, Bounding into Comics, and they got me doing, I don't know if that's pouty or duck face. I think I'm like mid-word, but they didn't use like an screen cap of me, which is appreciated. They could have gone in a different direction, but Leanna Kersner, Mortal Kombat 11's changes to female characters is sexist. And they actually went and quoted, they included my video, thank you for that, but they actually quoted it. They actually right off the bat, they had the definition of benevolent sexism as the type of sexism that reinforces an apparently positive sex role binary that men are strong and women are kind. It seems, remember I said there were typos, temporary, beneficial for women in the short term, but can become a real problem as things go on and women have higher aspirations and women step outside traditional boundaries. And it went on from there. They showed the men of Mortal Kombat being decidedly shirtless and pantsless in some cases. There's a lot of no pants. I guess those are technically shorts, but Shao Kahn has never had pants. And we love him that way, right? Right. But they actually quoted me accurately. And here are my tweets before I made the video. I'll show you the date, March 29th, which means this came out on the exact same day that my Friday video came out. So it probably wasn't included in their writing. But they also included pictures of actual MMA fighters. And you notice that they're not wearing much. And, so, thank you for Bounding into Comics for quoting me accurately. It's nice to be able to, at the very least, educate some people on the idea of benevolent sexism. I'm sorry it took a Mortal Kombat developer being thoughtless, to do it. But this is really good. Anything that gets more awareness out there of the fact that there are different types of sexism. The hostile form of sexism is not the only form of sexism out there, that these putting women up on pedestals and, treating every woman as look, Mr. Bubbles, an angel. Or, they're a mother or someone's sister or someone's daughter, relationally to men. Instead of treating women like actual, equals, that some women do want to get in that ring and do want to kick some ass. And, I had the real pleasure to meet Joni Lore when she was still alive. And she was a lovely, lovely woman. but her talking about kind of having to deal with sort of being atypical and being extremely tall. She told us a story about walking around in Japan when she was wrestling over there, and people would just stare because she was such a tall woman. But she was a lovely person. And she was very body positive. I mean, she posed for Playboy, even though, she's not, the typical beauty standard for that magazine. And again, really, really sad at the loss of Joni. But for people who don't know who that is, Chyna from WWE, Joni Lore was her real name. But this stuff is really important because it does, they mentioned the Amy Klobuchar example of the fact that, Amy Klobuchar took all this crap about the reports that she was too tough on her staff, and then a documentary surrounding Beto O'Rourke's campaign in Texas, where he was actually caught on video verbally abusing his staff, swearing at them, getting angry. Very few people batted an eye. It was a complete double standard. Like, being a terrible boss is being a terrible boss. You shouldn't swear at your staff. You shouldn't, treat your staff like servants. Wrong is wrong. Do better is do better. But people definitely handled those two cases of very similar behavior very differently. I pointed out even before that came to light that Beto O'Rourke has very high staff turnover as well. And people aren't criticizing him in the same way. They've actually found that the more competent a woman in management is, the less likable she is perceived as, where that's not so for men. The more competent a man seems, the more likable he is as a boss. It's an inverse metric for women. And nobody's quite sure why. This is just what they've measured. And it's gonna become an issue for every woman sort of seeking either a higher office or to be CEO of a company. I mean, look at the Facebook stuff when Mark Zuckerberg is the head of that company, right? He is the guy. He is the founder. He's I believe he still has controlling stock, though I could be wrong there. But when crap goes down, everybody looks to Sheryl Sandberg to be the adult in the room. And when, she isn't the adult in the room, people are like, oh, she's on her way out. Like, there's all this talk about, like, she's going to be fired. Like, why? She can't stop Mark Zuckerberg from, being an empathy lacking half a human. I shouldn't call him half a human, but you know what I mean. That was a joke. I just watched Chris Rock's clip from the NAACP awards, okay? Like, I'm kind of in Chris Rock mode. Afro. Yeah, this is one of these instances where this is actually a positive experience with Enthusiast Media. And so I kind of wanted to make the video to say, thanks, Bounding Into Comics. I'd really appreciate it if you could fix the typos, because then, it'll be a really good article that I could share. It'd actually be kind of useful for a college lecture I do on sexism in gaming. I call it accidental sexism in gaming. The patrons have seen part of it, but the recording crapped out halfway. Yeah, it's actually an ongoing lecture I do at the college level. And I'm actually going to put this Mortal Kombat thing in, because I have a thing in the talk about the HeManShera Test that it doesn't matter how much or little clothes characters are wearing individually. It's comparative. So, He-Man and She-Ra from the old days, of course you know She-Ra, but you line them up and She-Ra does not look significantly more naked than He-Man. But Mortal Kombat has actually created like the inverse He-Man and She-Ra test, where He-Man did not look much more naked than She-Ra did, because She-Ra sort of had that bustier, so she had décolletage, and, you know, bare arms, and she sort of had the bare legs, because she was in, like, the short kind of tennis skirt, and then He-Man had, like, the chest harness and the furry shorts. But now it's like you have these women, like, covered head to toe, except for, as I pointed out in the article, Devora, because she's like a bug lady and she has like an exoskeleton. And then there's all these shirtless guys everywhere. And, yeah, it works that way as well. That if you are notably covering up your characters based on gender, your women based on gender, that is just as bad in a lot of ways as, you know, notably nakedizing them. I just made that word up. Nakedizing. You know, making them seem ridiculously underclothed. I mean, there's an actual design flaw in this Mortal Kombat case too, because it's made me start overthinking. The minute a developer says something like, they're going into battle, they want to be covered, you start thinking about the absolute absurdity of a lot of the situations that Mortal Kombat puts their characters in. Like, first and foremost, oh, you cracked his skull and you broke his spine. Oh, he kind of rolls out of the move and stands up and he's ready to fight again. No, that wouldn't happen. You break somebody's spine the way you do in those X-ray moves, they don't get back up. You broke their spine. Their legs don't work anymore. Like, forget logic. Forget running into battle with armor. And not all fighting styles have armor. More on that in a bit. But, you know, then it's the other thing of, oh yeah, Liu Kang's gonna fight Sub-Zero, or Johnny Cage is gonna fight Sub-Zero. Who has ice attacks? You're shirtless. That is a case of frostbite waiting to happen. Like, the first time they get encased in ice, frostbite. Frostbite. Liu Kang would put on a shirt. I mean, Liu Kang's a revenant in the new game, and Johnny Cage is, you know, like Dad Johnny Cage, but they have that, like, stunt double guy. But you know what I mean, right? Like, you start thinking about all the practicalities that Mortal Kombat doesn't have. I mean, a lot of the fatalities are just physically impossible. Like, there is no logic. There is no, this makes sense. There is no, we're running into battle. Let's be practical. But here's the thing about practicality. Here's the thing. And this is a thing that guys who design these costumes don't know because they've never actually been in this situation. But women who have cosplayed characters like this and have worn ridiculous clothing because it's fun, we know. And this is why I strongly recommend you have a woman with knowledge of the type of costumes you're designing involved in this design process so this doesn't happen. What have the Mortal Kombat developers replaced the bodysuits, or as they called it, bikinis with? I can only think of one Mortal Kombat character who actually wore a bikini, Shiva. The others had the crisscross front figure model outfits. Like, that's what they always look like to me, except for Scarlet. And, you know, in fairness, you couldn't take much more away from Scarlet's last costume before this game. But what have they replaced those bodysuits, which at least you can say they had freedom of movement. It might be too much freedom of movement because you moved sideways and a boob popped out, but that didn't matter at the time because we weren't being asked to think about realism or practicalities or anything like that. It was just silly fun, and nobody's costume made sense. I mean, all that, like, heavy ninja garb, like, all you have to do is grab that loose fabric and they're at a disadvantage. Like, it actually makes sense to wear less. There's less to grab, right? But, you know, they substituted leather pants. Tight, clingy, low-rider leather pants. Or a lot of very heavy, rigid, decorative armor. The thing about decorative armor is it's called decorative for a reason. First of all, you have any solid pieces like that on your costume and you're moving around a lot, you get rubs. Trust me. As somebody who's worn that kind of stuff, who has worn the Foz Shape and like Wonderflex costume armor, that stuff rubs in very bad places sometimes. But those leather pants, There is no freedom of movement in tight leather pants. The item that has wardrobe malfunctioned on me more than anything in photo shoots and on like TV shows and things like that are leather or simulation leather pants, because they have no stretch. And the minute you try to do anything, you do a squat, the minute you go like kick, which, you know, that's part of Mortal Kombat, high kick, low kick, the minute you go high kick, you have pants split. Like, pfft, right? Like, shoop, right down the back. It just splits open. There is no give. The seam has a weak point. Rip. Melina's pants would have split open in the first freaking fight. There's no freedom of movement in leather. Leather armor doesn't look that way. Leather armor is layered and loose, and it's thick. It's not the sexy like calfskin leather. It's the thick like cowhide. It's ridiculous. Once again, a bunch of men are telling us women what's more practical to dress in. Guys, you don't have the first clue unless you went through like an 80s hairband period and you wore leather pants. But if you did that, you'd know. You try to move like that in tight leather pants, you split your pants. A bunch of you are probably laughing right now because it's happened to you. But this is what drives me crazy when game developers go for that realistic argument. It's usually worse. And then you just say, look, it's just fun. It's fantasy. None of this makes sense. It's just silly fun. Because then people go, okay, at least you're not insulting my intelligence. You know, you're not leather pants-splaining me. But the minute they start going, oh no, they're running into battle. Show me one like service person or first responder, or MMA fighter, or even wrestler who fights in tight leather pants. None. I think there was one like Saturday Night Main Event, or one of those pay-per-views, or I seem to recall the Honky Tonk Man being involved. And they had a whole thing where the pants actually split. I don't remember who the other wrestler was, but somebody split their pants because they were leather pants. But no, they may look like leather on some costumes, but they're actually a stretch fabric, which is called a bodysuit. And we're back to the original Mortal Kombat 1, Mortal Kombat 2, Mortal Kombat 3. The costumes started getting more kind of magical, in part because, you know, they introduced resurrected Sindel, my girl Sindel. And so she had that like Bride of Frankenstein look going on. But again, the minute people start coming back from the dead, realism has left the building. Don't worry about it, you know? But yeah, the new outfits, and I've said this before and I don't remember what game it's about, but the new outfits are not more practical. They're dumb in a different way. And this is a problem when you start talking about realism in a game with X-ray moves that involve broken bones that people just get up and keep fighting through. Like, sure, some people, you know, you break your arm, you keep going, you walk on a broken leg, even though it hurts like hell, but you snap your spine in like 16 places and crack your skull, you're not getting back up. You're not. That is KO. You know? If you sustain injuries like that, you are lucky to live. And it takes you like months to walk again, years sometimes. None of this is practical. So this is why I talk about this stuff. It's not because I'm like, you know, with some people like, oh, you just care so much about pixel titties. That's actually what a guy said to me over the weekend, and he just wouldn't let it go when I said that's not what I said. Oh, but it's the only reason you'd possibly care about this. Well, for this gentleman and the others like him that decided in like these little packs, because it's never one of them. Do you notice this? It's never one of them. These guys never seem to be brave enough to confront somebody on their own. It has to be like them and two of their douchebag friends, at least. But then they get brave, and then, because it's always like, you know, they say something and you respond, and then it's three of them instantly. And it's like, you're not in my head. And if you don't take my word for, you're misrepresenting what I said, and you don't take my word for the fact that, like, that's not why I care about this. And the dumb thing is, if people go back and actually look at my Mortal Kombat videos, I actually said, like, Mortal Kombat 10, V Monroe and I went back and forth on this. He was really upset about that. I was like, I don't really mind. I kind of like Katana's new outfit, and, you know, I'm willing to give them a chance. I made it really clear that, and then my video on Jade, I said, I like these costumes. I really like the Scarlet costume. It's the stated intent behind the change that I have an issue with. If they were just bowing to cultural pressure, there's a better way to do that, but that I kind of understand. I can feel for them in that regard. You gotta do what you gotta do, and, you know, Mortal Kombat has been under fire from the minute it came into existence. But when they start saying we're being more mature, we're being more respectful. No, you know what's not respectful? Taking one unrealistic paradigm and swapping it for another and trying to convince women and guys, and quite frankly, in some ways, it's kind of worse regarding convincing the guys that this is more realistic, because they're less likely to actually have to be in the situation of wearing these ridiculous clothes. But saying that this second equally unrealistic paradigm, wardrobe, makeup, hair, whatever, saying that is actually real, that's a problem. When you're like going, none of this is real. We don't claim any of this is real. Like, it's all ridiculous. Fine. You're self-aware. But when you start trying to tell people that this is actually something that's attainable or achievable for women, that's an issue. I'm not saying that video games cultivate effects. We know they don't. What we do sort of know is that if people are bombarded with these images and messages over and over and over and over again collectively, because let's face it, video games don't happen in isolation. It's magazines and TV and all that stuff. People who don't have strong peer supports, who don't have a counter message somewhere else closer to them, they do start falling into this idea that, oh, I should look this way. And I want to be really clear, family and friends are a far more potent force in that regard. If people don't get those messages sort of reinforced by the people around them, this is not an issue. But whether or not this actually has some sort of contagion effect, it's just insulting to our intelligence as women who play these games for a bunch of guys to tell us what is more realistic or practical or comfortable when you've never actually had to do those activities in outfits like that. I have. And I'm telling you, from my own fairly extensive field testing, you can't high kick in a pair of leather pants. You just can't. All right. Thanks for watching. I went on a bit for effect because the whole thing's absurd. But thanks again to Bounding Into Comics. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/LeannaK. Thanks for watching.